Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. This week we're joined by a very special guest, our friend Miranda, who is another fan of The Nanny. Miranda, say hi.
Hi.
We just want to thank you for joining us. We look forward to having your input. As per usual, we will start our episode with a brief summary of the episode. The Sheffield home is getting ready to host Sylvia's surprise 50th birthday party with decorations and a rehearsal surprise because, as Fran explains to Gracie, at Sylvia's advanced age, the surprise leads to paramedics rubbing two paddles together and shouting clear. Maxwell and Cece won't be able to attend the party because they will be spending the weekend at Jean Shallot's house to commemorate the Tony nominations. Much to Cece's disappointment, Maxwell contributes 2 antique burgundies to the party, which Fran ultimately uses to make sangria. After Niles declined to pass on Cece's message that she'd pick Maxwell up at the house instead of meeting him at the train station, Cece decides to pick up a few bottles of wine to put Maxwell in the mood. She ends up locked in the wine cellar. She's relieved when Fran comes down for another bottle of wine to adjust the sangria mix, but quickly changes her tune when Fran lets the door close behind her, leaving them both stranded. While the party rages upstairs, Fran and Cece are left to their own stress coping mechanisms, drinking and doing hair. Meanwhile, Brighton and Yetta have teamed up to con partygoers out of bar mitzvah presents for Shmooey. The conversation between Cece and Fran inevitably turns to Maxwell and how he's ruining their ability to date other men. At that point, Maxwell opens the wine cellar door to let them out, or at least it seems that way. After Cece threw Fran under the bus for the terrible things she said while they were trapped, Fran leaves Cece locked in the wine cellar, at least for a little while longer. At the end of the night, Sylvia concludes it was the best party ever, and Fran gets Maxwell's more accurate side of the story about the time he and Cece's flight made an emergency landing in Fiji. Bernadette, Miranda, is there anything you think I should add to the summary?
I think you got all the broad strokes.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Bernadette, would you like to take us to scene 1?
Yes. So we begin in the living room, and they are making preparations for Ma's 50th birthday, Ma being, of course, Sylvia. And so Fran's in there with the kids. Brighton, of course, takes some helium out of the balloon and taunts Maggie, and Maggie calls him immature. And Fran, who also took in some helium, says, yeah, Brighton's so immature.
Right.
Again, they're questioning, isn't 50th a stretch for Sylvia? And it is. I think the quote was like Clinton's bicycle shorts.
Yeah. So
is that a reference? I mean, I'm guessing that was relevant at the time, and I'm trying to remember now if this was like pre-Lewinsky or post-Lewinsky in the timeline of things.
Because this was 94,
correct.
95, and I think
okay,
it was like 97, 98.
Yeah, so so this would have been some unintentional foreshadowing.
I think it was what I was actually expecting Bernadette to comment on how she didn't like the line because they're making fun of his weight.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Because the exchange was Niles asks, isn't she stretching the truth a tad? And Fran responds, please, the only thing stretched more is Clinton's shorts. 50 billion served, and that's just the White House.
Oh, okay. I didn't quite get all of that because I didn't know if there was a specific incident like back then having to do with bicycle shorts. Gotcha. Okay.
I think he was riding his bike at the time, or he wanted to ride his bike. That I couldn't comment on. I just, when I watched the episode and I heard that line, I was like, oh, Bernadette's going to hate this. That was my thought. So.
Yeah. Yep. Anyway, so you hear, obviously they already have some of the decorations up. They're still kind of working on it. But you hear from the front door, gee, I wonder if my daughter Fran is at home. And it's Sylvia. And, I believe it's Gracie who asks why they're practicing the surprise. And of course, as you mentioned in your summary, Debbie, because at Sylvia's age, it's the surprise leads to two paramedics rubbing the two panels together.
Right. And Fran also points out
Mhm.
to Gracie that at Gracie's age, it's a big thrill. Like,
Yeah.
a surprise is fun.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Not so much for older, but Fran goes to answer the door, and again Sylvia walks in, they say surprise, and she's like, oh my god, oh my god. Like, it's just very stilted. I don't know.
It's really so delightfully deadpan.
Yes, deadpan is the word I was looking for. And
Did you
and
catch what
Fran
Fran
says,
says?
yeah,
Excellent.
Fran says, I hope you fake it better with daddy. To which Sylvia says, I was his first. What does he know?
Correct.
Of course, as a child, you would not get that reference. As an adult, you do.
Yes.
Yep.
But Niles is then kind of questioning Sylvia of like, are you sure you want? And I don't have the exact food, but essentially it comes down to they're all finger food. And Sylvia explains, didn't you know if it's on a toothpick, it's not fattening? And then Fran talks about, I believe, an aunt or someone who uses like chopsticks, and she looks
Aunt
like a
Frida.
man. Yeah, with going around. But then they also talk about who's attending. There's apparently little cousin Irving that Sylvia and Fran say maybe put Maggie with. He has a wonderful personality. And of course, they take that, Maggie takes that to mean not good looking, right?
Mhm.
Maxwell and Cece walk in from the back. They're, Sylvia and Fran are so thankful that Maxwell's letting them have the party here. Sylvia explains, at their apartment, they only have one. And okay, did she purposely, like, she like, pronounce toilet, right?
Yes.
Yes, I think.
It's like it was like
Turlet.
turlet or something like that. Yeah. And apparently Marty's brothers are going to be there. And, so it's good to have more than just one. And that reminds Fran to get Gracie to go put Airwick solids in every bathroom.
Correct.
Yeah. And again, we learn that Cece, Sylvia's saying, oh, sorry you can't make it. And Cece's like, oh, well, she and Maxwell are actually about to get on the train to go meet Jean Charlotte?
Shallot.
Shallot.
Shallots. And again, I think does Cece describe him as like sexy or something?
Sylvia does.
Sylvia. Oh, okay, yeah, Sylvia. And to which Fran says, "You better stop inhaling when you do your hair."
Right.
So again, as you mentioned in your summary, they're going to kind of commemorate the Tony nomination. So, Cece's kind of bragging that she and Maxwell will be sharing a guest cottage.
Right near the
And
water.
yes, and of course, Niles, being Niles, says, "Oh, I don't have the exact thing, but something
I do.
about."
How
Okay, say it.
convenient, sir. How convenient, sir, should you want to drown yourself?
Mm-hmm. But Maxwell, he's not going to be there, but he is contributing to. Did you say it was Burgundy? I thought it was champagne.
It was
It was
Burgundy.
vintage Burgundy.
Okay, and Cece's kind of taken aback, like, oh, I thought that was supposed to be for our weekend. They couldn't possibly, care about vintage. And then Fran takes the bottle back because Cece had kind of gone for it and says, of course we do. I think I can't recall did you catch what beverage or something they had that
It
dates
was
back?
Tab.
From the time of the Bay of Pigs, right?
Yes.
So, anyway, Cece is on her way out because she wants to pick up a gift for the hostess. She wants to get the perfect gift. And of course, Niall says, the perfect gift would be for her to miss the train.
Right.
So anyway, the scene essentially is setting up that there's going to be this quote unquote surprise party for Sylvia, and that Maxwell and Cece are supposed to be going off on this weekend together. Do you either of you have anything you want to add to that scene?
Miranda, would you like to go first?
Oh, to that scene. Uh no, I also would add that like the food, like the finger foods, I think it was not only was it finger foods, but I think it was also things that were kind of, I think Niles was implying they were also kind of low class.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He's not used to this type of party.
No. No.
No. We'll see more of that shortly. I just want to mention on the front of little cousin Irvy, one of the reasons that Maggie takes him, assumes that he is not good looking, is because Fran comments about, is he still ringing the bell in Notre Dame?
Oh, I missed that reference.
So
Yep, I remember that now.
yeah, not super flattering.
Nope.
I think that's the only thing I wanted to add to the scene.
Okay.
Actually, I take that back. See, I do this all the time. Like, no, I don't want to add anything except this. So just because you flagged it before, but I just want to give the full line. Fran describes her Aunt Frida as using two toothpicks like chopsticks. She looks like a very heavily made up praying mantis.
Yeah.
Which I just enjoy that comparison. So I
Do you want to take us to the kitchen then, Debbie?
I would love to. So we now see we have Brighton and Gracie and Niles and Fran in the kitchen, and Fran has clearly emptied out and Maggie's there as well. Has emptied out the vintage Burgundy into a big party punch bowl, and she's making sangria, as we learned. Brighton sort of is complaining about how this isn't going to be his type of party because basically it'll be a bunch of 6-year-old ladies pinching his cheeks. And Maggie says to learn to love it. That's as close to a woman as you'll ever get. And Fran tries to make this party a little bit more interesting for the kids by saying, think of the party as an educational experience. Pretend you're Diane Fosse observing the gorillas. Just don't get too close when they eat. You can lose a hand that way. And so she's like directing the kids as to how to mix the sangria, how much equal to add, how much fruit, etc. And Niles sees what they're doing, and he says using that wine to make sangria is like asking Pavarotti to sing Muskrat Love. And Fran then's like, oh wait, I want to get all these different albums from my room, so she sends the kids. And so she mentions to Niles, did I mention my cousin Sophie is coming tonight? And he says, let me guess, she's smart and has a wonderful personality. And Fran's like, no, she's dumb as a post, but she's built like a brick house. And so Niles is excited about the prospect of meeting cousin Sophie. Well, the excitement about the party is sort of interrupted by Cece coming in, and she wants to know where Maxwell is because she's ready to take him to the train station. And he's already left. And she's like, Niles, I called and said I'd pick him up here. I told you to give him the message. And he said, I thought you said I should give him a massage. I didn't think that was appropriate. And Cece looks annoyed. Niles walks out. Cece's annoyed, but then she takes a calming breath and she says, I'm not going to let anything bother me this weekend. As long as I'm here, I might as well pick up a little wine to put Maxwell in the mood. And she says that as she's walking behind Fran. And she smugly says, did I tell you we have a private compartment and tonight is a full moon? And Cece walks off and Fran says, well, I hope she packed a lot in there. Bernadette, Miranda, would either of you like to add anything?
So I want to add, and this is also a comment on the previous scene. I don't know if anybody's talked about it, but the signals. So Fran does a signal for cousin Irving that's almost looks like a monkey or something, and then the signal she does for, was it Sophie, is the curvaceous woman.
Yes.
Thing. Yeah.
And Niles even does oh, send me a signal. And then he does a complicated, almost baseball things, and then ends it with that curvy signal. So not subtle in the least.
No.
No. And also I think that I shared Niall's horror at having Maggie like putting first of all putting the equal packets in the sangria was just like, oh my God. But also the, the like pouring that in and pouring that probably very expensive wine into the sangria. And then she also put in like I see I'm gonna have to recreate like the Nanny sangria recipe, of course, now. Not with like super expensive wine, but like with the equal and the fruit. And then I think she also had like a can of it looked like a can of like fruit cocktail or something she was adding to it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I've never made sangria, so I just sort of took it as a given that that's how you made sangria. But I guess not.
I would say that that's like a an interpretive, I think like a classic sangria would be like red wine, fruit, brandy, and like seltzer water or something. So I think
Oh,
that was a very like Queen's fine version of sangria.
interesting. Because I I just assumed that that's how it's done. Um,
Interesting. So yes, you will definitely need to recreate it then, Miranda, and let us
Yeah, I'm very
what.
curious. On a small scale though, I don't think I could handle a punch bowl of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
one thing I'll add is about equal. I think we've heard the advice from Sylvia that why pay for it if the restaurants are giving it for free, giving it away for free. Um, which is why I thought they were using equal instead of a different type of sweetener.
Yeah. Well, and also we'll note that she was using packets. So clearly I think that must have been purloined from
Exactly.
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think we've heard that advice previously, right, Bernadette? Or am I just thinking of other episodes
Um,
that
I
we
can't
haven't talked about yet?
recall off the top of my head.
Okay.
Could be something for the future, but I did want to add to at the beginning of the scene when Brighton and Maggie are kind of having their back and forth. After Maggie says, "We'll get used to it. That's the closest you're gonna get." Brighton responds with two words, cousin Irving. And so like there's this build up about like trying to cast the cousin in this negative manner, right? Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, so the other thing I thought was interesting is that at first, you know, talking about the food and how this is not really Niles's usual kind of party food because Fran asks him, "Oh, like didn't you make it? Is this supposed to be a dip?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, it's pacini mushrooms or something like that." And she's like, "Oh man, I'll have to go to the store and get some onion soup dip or mix." Um, so it's just kind of again emphasizing like this is not the usual fare. But what's hilarious is that Niles gapes, like his jaw drops when he sees Fran pouring that in. And it's there for like a really long time, right?
Yeah.
He's horrified. But yeah, so yeah, that's all I wanted to add to that. Miranda, would you like to take us to the wine cellar?
Sure. And I think my memory for detail is not going to be as great. So if you guys need to add anything, feel free. Um, so we now cut to Cece is gone into the wine cellar. She kind of quickly walks in, and what you see behind her is the door automatically shuts.
Mhm.
And it's like a heavy, um, a heavy metal door.
Mhm.
And so she goes over to the corner, she picks up a bottle of wine, and she's in very good spirits. And she turns around, goes back up, tries to open the door, and then pulls the handle
Yes.
off of the door.
Not what you
Uh,
want to happen in a cellar.
no. So understandably, she starts freaking out, and I don't remember if she says anything, but she looks very visually upset.
I can't believe this is happening.
Okay,
But
there you go.
that kind of growingly hysterical laughter.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. So I forget now. She's leaning against the door that she can't open, and it kind of seems like she's like laughing, but like laugh crying.
Yes. Yes.
That like, we've all been there, but like that kind of that edge.
Yes.
Okay. So I have to, does it cut back to the party or does it just go straight until when Fran comes down?
It
Um,
oh, I'm in the wrong page. Piece of my notes. It's the same scene.
Okay. All right. So what happens is so Cece's kind of at this point, she's kind of further away from the door. So Fran comes down quickly, like just opens the door and says, "Oh, I put too much equal or something in the sangria. I need to get another bottle of wine." And like you can see the joy on Cece's face. She's like, "Oh my God, I'm rescued, right?" And behind Fran, you see the door start to close again. And Cece's kind of like rushing for it. And then the door closes and Cece says something like before the door closes, she's like, "Nanny, fine, I love you," or something.
yeah.
And then the door closes and then she like just has this about face. And then Fran doesn't understand what's happened. So she's going over to get the bottle of wine. She turns around and then she says something like, "Oh, you're so hot and cold," like, with her mood, she was happy and then she wasn't. And is like, "Oh, the change happens early to some women,"
Uh-huh.
or making some menopause reference. And then Cece's like, "No, like, we're trapped in the basement because there's no handle on the door." And Fran's like, "Oh, no, like I'm gonna try and fix it." So she takes the handle and, kind of tries to stick it in the door, realizes that's not gonna work. Then she starts freaking out and starts banging on the door. And then I don't remember if it was Fran or Cece said something like, "Oh, well, this used to be a bomb shelter, so no one's gonna hear you."
Mm-hmm.
And then Fran is like, "Oh, no, like, you know, these adenoids are so powerful that, our neighbors decided to move closer to the airport to get away from me, basically." So she starts screaming again, and then, nothing happens. Um, and then she starts turning around and is like, "It's kind of small in here." And to me, it did not look like a very small wine cellar, but
No.
I'm not trapped in it, so I can't speak to that. So, and then Cece's like, "Well, are you claustrophobic?" And Fran is like, "Oh, well, thank you for giving me that idea. Like now I'm gonna be claustrophobic."
Yeah.
So then Fran sort of starts walking around and has this, I guess, flashback to being in the dressing room at Loman's with her mother. And so she's saying, "Oh, there are dimples everywhere, and none of them are on a face."
Mm-hmm.
And then Cece's just like, slaps Fran to kind of stop her from freaking out. And then Fran turns and realizes she's standing next to a breaker box. And so Fran's like, "Oh, well, I know what we're gonna do. I'm gonna cut, this must be the alarm. So I'm gonna cut the wires and then it'll set the alarm off and then someone will come down and get us." So she asked Cece, she's like, "Oh, do you have anything to cut the wires?" And so Cece had a nail clipper. Cece had a very put together trousseau, by the way. She had so much stuff with her. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so Fran takes the nail clippers, clips a wire, and instead of clipping the no alarm goes off, it seems like what she clipped instead was whatever was circulating air. So a fan of some kind. And so then they start to freak out some more. And does it cut? Do they stay in the cellar? Is it cut back to the party at this point?
There's still a little bit left
Okay.
in terms
So
of
is this when Fran is like
resolution.
oh yes, oh yeah. So Fran slaps Cece, and Cece's kind of like, "What?" And then Fran's like, "Well, weren't you being hysterical?" And Cece's like, "No." And Fran was like, "Oh, my mistake."
Yeah. That's what it ends on. Yeah. So like the thing was, "Oh, Nanny, fine, I love you." You fool.
I'm so glad you were able to get what she switched from "I love you" to, because I watched that part of the scene like 3 or 4 times and I could not make out the word
Yeah,
after "you."
I believe it's you fool.
Okay. I assumed it had to be moron because of, that's just, to me, that sounds like a
Something
word.
along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a
Yeah.
pleasant way to describe Fran.
Which
We're
is like,
accurate.
to be fair, why would Fran think that they were going to get locked in?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't think. um, but yeah, no, I think you did a good job, Miranda. Did you have something to add to that, Debbie?
I don't.
Okay.
So would you like to take us up to the party?
Back
Bernadette?
upstairs, we're in the living room, and Yetta is like walking out from underneath the banner, explaining to everybody, okay, when she comes in, you jump out, yell surprise. And then but then she too kind of like asks, I think, like Gracie maybe, like
Margaret.
why? Oh, Maggie, why? Because it's her surprise party for her 50th. 50th? She has brassieres older than that. And but then here's the thing. Yetta realizes, uh if Sylvia's older than 50, what does that make Yetta? Oh, you know what? Yeah, 50.
Exactly.
But again, this then it's actually time for the surprise. Again, Sylvia at the door with the same like deadpanned line of, I wonder if my daughter Fran is at home. So everybody's going to surprise, and we open the door, turn on the light, surprise. And Sylvia walks in. Oh my God. Look at me. We were going off to see the Shawshank Redemption. But Yetta is at the doors, again, the ever-changing doors that lead to different areas of the house. And are
Correct.
sometimes swinging and sometimes double doors. Right now they're double doors. So Yetta went to the wrong set of doors because she kind of yells at the others to quiet, yell it when she comes in.
Will you wait till she walks in?
Yes. But yes, Sylvia's through the front door, and she's wearing like a fancy red dress, right? And like a little shawl or cloak. And again, she's just like, oh, we were just going to see the Shawshank Redemption. Like, terrible acting.
Yes.
Not natural at all. But okay. This is every time I hear Shmooey, I just laugh. As Yetta approaches Brighton, Shmooey, come meet Uncle Stan. And he just kind of goes, with her. And Yetta says, "Oh, this is Shmooey. He's gonna get bar mitzvahed when you're off. Was it a cruise or something?
Yes.
Some type of trip."
Stanley, look, Shmooey, you haven't seen him since he was this tall. He's getting bar mitzvahed when you're on your cruise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so of course, oh, here, this is from me and your Aunt Cookie. So it's money.
Correct.
And then kind of after Yetta and Brighton are on their own, Yetta explains, we split everything 50-50. So now they have this scheme going with Grandma Yetta and Shmooey.
And did you recognize Uncle Stanley?
I did not.
I believe that is Fran Drescher's father.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Yeah. So we've talked about this previously. He's played Uncle Stanley previously, I think, and he's also he and his wife played the extras in the waiting in the therapist's office in Imaginary Friend.
Yeah.
So so Uncle Stanley was played by Mort Drescher.
Interesting. Yeah. So did you guys have anything else though you wanted to add to that scene?
I'm good.
No, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess it's my turn.
Yes, it is.
And so we're back down in the wine cellar, and Fran is less than happy. She says, I can't believe I'm missing the party. I mean, how many times does your mom turn 50? 2, 3 times? And so Cece kind of goes to her standard and says, here, have a drink. And what's amazing to me is she like has this amazing little, is it a shot glass? I don't even know what to call it, but It went
Like
from
a
flat to
portable plastic cup.
Yeah, like a camp cup or something.
Yeah, I think I got one as like when I was on vacation one time as like a little like souvenir.
yeah. But so she takes it out, she unfurls it. Here, have a drink. It'll calm you down. And Fran's like, I don't drink. And Cece can't believe this. What do you do when you're tense? And Fran looks at her. Hair is what she says. What?
Mhm.
I do hair. And she starts approaching Cece as if she's going to do Cece's hair. And Cece's like, don't even think about it. And Fran's like, okay, fine. And starts singing the song 99 Bottles of Beer,
Mhm.
and she gets through, one verse. She doesn't even get down to 98. And
Yeah.
Cece caves. Can you do a nice little French twist? Oh, so severe you want? Well, let's see what I can do. And so Fran grabs Cece's coat and, unfurls it as if she's a hairdresser and puts it around Cece and, does her best impression of a hairdresser. So tell me, what's doing? And she has a comb and she starts working on Cece's hair. And
Teasing
Cece,
it.
yes, she teases Cece's hair. And Cece complains, I can't believe this is happening. This was supposed to be the weekend when Maxwell and she kind of trails off. Fran's like, go ahead, I'm listening. And Cece continues, well, last time we came this close. We were coming back from a production in Sydney when our plane had to make an emergency landing in the Fiji Islands. It was off season, so the place was deserted. You can use your imagination, says Cece. And Fran's like, paint me a picture, pretend I can't. And so Cece does. We were in the bar. We had a few cocktails. Maxwell had that look in his eyes. Well, he was too much of a gentleman. And Fran stops what she's doing and gets this great look on her face and says, well, let me get this straight. He was drunk. You were the only woman on a deserted island, and he still didn't touch you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She, as we will learn, Cece was clearly delirious on that trip. Yeah. Do you guys want to add anything?
No, I'm good.
Nope.
All right. Miranda, would you like to take us upstairs into the kitchen?
Okay, so I'm trying to.
So it's with Yetta and Gracie in the kitchen.
And then Sylvia comes in.
Oh, and this is okay. So I forget if Yetta and Gracie say anything before Sylvia comes in.
I don't.
But
nothing significant.
Okay, yeah. So I'm remembering this now. So Yetta is like rolling something that kind of looks like a bingo, one of those things that has bingo balls coming out of it, but they never quite explain this. And Sylvia says something about, oh, present. Like, oh, where's Fran? And then Yetta's like, maybe she's getting your present. And then Sylvia's like, oh no, like, she already gave me your present. And she goes to Yetta and is like, oh, what did you get me?
Uh-huh.
And Yetta's like, oh, it's with all the other presents, like in the other room. Like, and then Sylvia like turns around and I think is just looking in the fridge, and then Yetta waves Gracie over. And is like, here, like she writes like I guess from mom or whatever, and gives it and just go put it on the biggest present.
Right.
Yes. Yep. And that's it. Yeah, it's kind of funny because when Sylvia enters into the kitchen, she's kind of like dancing a little. But she's like, I'm very worried about Fran, and yet she's dancing. So that's the only thing I wanted to add.
Yeah. Would you like to take us back down to the wine cellar?
Sure. Okay.
If you want to, go for it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to direct that to Bernadette, but Miranda, we're happy to.
Oh no, yeah. I will defer because
you did have a very, very short scene, so.
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, you can go, Bernadette. Clearly, next time I do this, I need to take better notes. So
you're doing great.
You're doing great. Don't worry.
We're back in the wine cellar, and at this point, Cece's hair is full out, puffed out, like in the similar vein of like Sylvia's, Yetta's, but it seems very exaggerated. Like I did you guys think she was wearing a wig?
Oh, definitely. That
Okay,
Yeah.
that
because it's like
had to.
longer. It's longer than her actual hair, right?
Yeah. Oh,
And
that
it
was
so seems
definitely.
yeah. So, but she's just kind of staring off.
She looks sort of traumatized.
Yes. And Fran's doing her like doing Cece's nails, and Fran's obviously have been talking for a while, and she's mint chocolate chip and then a couple of other kind of flavors. Hey, that's 30. Oh my God, did they lie? And of course, she's like referring to Baskin Robbins. She's like, is 31 so catchy? Oh, wait, I forgot, another flavor. Let
The
me start again.
Sherberts.
Sherberts. Let me start again. And of course, that's like Cece's breaking point. Stop it. And at this point, Cece's like drawing a line. Well, because Fran starts referring to, oh yeah, when Blair and Tootie were stuck in Miss Garrett's freezer and Natalie came for a midnight snack. So that's the facts of life, the show.
Yep.
And Cece's just like, stop. Okay, we're not going to talk about. I didn't catch the first one, but
Woolite.
anybody?
What Woolite can and cannot do.
Okay.
Which I
Anybody?
think is a perfectly valid conversation topic.
Yeah. Anybody with the last name Cassidy and odd-shaped moles on Eastern European women. I think women or people.
Europeans.
Sorry?
I thought it was just Eastern Europeans, period.
Oh,
like
yes. Eastern Europeans. Yes. Okay. So, yeah. And then I have in my notes just OMG. Do you know what that references, Debbie?
So I think so Fran's response to Cece limiting their topics of conversation is okay, but you're really restricting the conversation. Meanwhile, and she like goes over to the toilet case, takes out a mirror, opens it, hands it to Cece.
Yes.
Look how gorgeous your hair looks.
And Cece's reaction. Oh my God.
Needless to say, Cece was not thrilled.
Nope. It's not her usual look.
No, not at all.
Anything else you guys wanted to add to that scene?
I have nothing else. Miranda?
I am going to say that I think Cece's wine bottle is getting progressively lower.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah. So Debbie, you want to take us to the living room?
Sure. So we go back to the party, and the reason I was so insistent about talking about Aunt Frida before is two-part. One of them is right here, because at the beginning of the scene, we see a heavily made up woman picking things off the, I guess, buffet table using 2 toothpicks.
Oh, I totally missed that.
Okay.
On the first go around.
Well,
okay.
I just want to note it. It's that is at this point Aunt Frida. We will come back to that in future fun. That's the second reason I wanted to make sure to highlight it. So we see this awkward conversation between Stanley and Shmooey, aka Brighton. Stanley says to him, "I've got one word for you, styrofoam." And Brighton's response is, "But that's not biodegradable." And Stanley's like, "Who's asking you to eat it?" And then we kind of cut away from their conversation, and we see Maggie. She's sort of like, hiding by the mirror on the wall. And this guy about her age comes over and he says hi, and she says hi, and he says, "What are you doing over here all by yourself?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm trying to avoid running into this geek Irvy. I'm Maggie." And he's like, "I'm Irvy." And he walks away, and of course she like is upset with herself that she just ruined her chances with this nice looking guy who's about her age.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if that wasn't enough, Maxwell comes in through the door, and Niles is standing by the door, and he has a balloon. He's just been inhaling the helium, and he says in the high pitched voice, "What are you doing home?" And he just is sort of embarrassed about that. And Maxwell says, "Niles, what is going on here? Look at this place. Where's Miss Fine?" "Oh, she's missing." "Missing? Keep your voice down. I don't want to alarm anybody." "It's very strange, Niles. Miss Babcock's gone missing too." "Yahoo!" is the response from Niles.
Classic Niles.
Yeah. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that scene?
I do not.
Nope.
All right. I believe it's your turn, Miranda, if you want to take us back down to the wine cellar.
Okay. So this is when they start talking about Mr. Sheffield, right?
Yeah.
So the game of truth
Okay.
or dare.
Yes. And
Yeah.
Cece being
Okay.
very juvenile.
Yeah. So Cece wants to play truth or dare, and Fran is like, no, this is something like I know all your truths, or something about it's
Your
gonna
truths
be
are so boring.
yeah, your truths are so boring. And then Cece's like, I'll let you do my makeup.
Yeah.
And so Fran's like, sure. So Cece's sitting down, and so Fran goes, truth or dare. And Cece's kind of like pretends to kind of think about it and is like, truth. And so Fran, I don't know where all this stuff is coming from, but like they have all the hair stuff and the makeup
Yeah.
and all, Cece must have brought a lot of stuff in that to the weekend. But anyway, so Fran has this big brush out and is doing Cece's face and is something like, oh, so tell me, like, if you could spend the night with anyone, who would it be? And then she's like, oh, know your answer, like hollow your cheeks and just keep going.
We both know game's
Yeah.
over. Suck in your cheeks.
Yeah.
Correct.
And Cece's like, well, I might surprise you. And Fran's like, okay, well, tell me. And Cece's like, it's Maxwell. And Fran's like, oh no, like she acts all
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Get out of
shocked, like,
town.
yeah. And so they start talking, and like Cece's, I think, starts talking about like how she finds him so attractive. And is this when Fran is like, oh, well, he does seem so attractive because all, especially compared to all the guys I date, make it seem like they're morons. And then Fran is like, oh, maybe it's just because like all the guys I date are morons.
Yeah.
Right.
And so then Cece starts talking about, oh, like, he's so handsome. And he says something about like the white streak in his hair. And Fran is kind of like, oh, well, that's like the one thing I would change because it makes him look like Pepe Le Pew.
Yeah. It's too Pepe Le Pew.
Yeah. And then Cece, so this is really cute because it kind of has this like bonding moment of like, they're kind of bonding over they both find Maxwell attractive. And Cece says something like, oh, but you've seen him in a bathing suit. And then Fran's like, no. And like Cece's like, oh yeah. And then Fran is like, well, I have seen him naked. And Cece's like, oh, what? Like, not fair. And then Fran is like, oh, well, I just caught him coming out of the shower. And then right before Cece's about to say anything, Fran's like, well, he locks the door now. So you're not going to have that option.
Right. That, as our loyal listeners know, I believe would be a reference to the episode Family Plumbing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where Fran walks in on Maxwell in the shower thinking that in the shower would be Brighton and her cousin Tiffany.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, continue. It's Maxwell. And at least he's using the soap on the rope she got him for Christmas.
Yeah.
And okay, so then basically it kind of devolves into Cece, kind of bemoaning the fact that Maxwell is not going to be interested in her, and kind of like, oh, she just kind of barking up the wrong tree at this point. And like and then she says something like, so she gets up and she's kind of dramatically going to the side, and the wine bottle is like completely empty at this point. She's like waving it around, and he's something like, I might as well just become an old spinster. Dried up old spinster. And then Fran like turns around and looks at the door, and then she's like, well, if that didn't bring Niles down, like we're gonna be stuck here forever.
Yeah, we're doomed.
Yeah, we're doomed. And then Cece then says something like, oh, like I might as well just like die, and then I'm gonna haunt Maxwell as a ghost, and I'll at least have my chains and I'll rattle them in the butler pantry.
Yes.
And like Fran is kind of just like, Cece, like, calm down, like you don't need to um, it's not worth it. And, and then they're kind of having this like moment of Fran is trying to be like, yeah, like we don't need, Mr. Sheffield, like, yeah, he's ruining other men for us because he's so attractive and nice. And that's when Mr. Sheffield comes and opens the door.
Yeah.
I think there might have been a little bit more to that. And so then Fran is like, oh, Mr. Sheffield, we don't need you here. Like you're
Stand
ruining
back,
us.
you
Yeah.
destroyer of girls' lives. Go,
Uh,
tell him, sister, is what she
yeah.
says to Cece.
Yeah. So she's kind of basically egging Cece on to, tell Maxwell. And so Cece seems like maybe for like a second but no. And she just like runs over to Maxwell and like falls into his arms and is like, oh, Mr. Sheffield or Maxwell. Yeah. And then Fran is just like, ugh. And then
I'm just going to interject. So Cece runs up to Maxwell. Maxwell, thank God, she never shuts up. She's been saying the most terrible things about you. Continue. Sorry.
No, that's fine. And then, Fran gets all put out because she's just like, ugh, Cece is lying and and so then Maxwell, I think, turns around and starts going back upstairs. And they all start going back upstairs. And then Fran turns to Cece and is like, oh, you forgot your purse. So Cece goes back into the other end of the room and then Fran shuts the door.
Yes.
Right.
Oh. She got her.
Yep.
I have a couple things I just want to add because I thought they were amusing. In the discussion, right when it starts to turn to Maxwell. So after Cece says that Maxwell is the guy she would want to spend the night with, she says, to think we could both be right now, we could both be lying in front of a fire, my head on his chest, him gently stroking my hair. And she like tries to touch her own hair and she's like, and Fran says to her, honey, take some deep breaths. You're running out of oxygen. And Cece says, you're right. Who am I kidding? He doesn't care about me. My therapist says I'm obsessed with him. And Fran's like, how much did you have to pay to find that out? And that's when they start talking about how attractive and cute he is. Yeah, I think that's the only important thing I wanted to add. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
Nope. I'm good.
All right. Do you want to take us back upstairs then?
Yeah. So obviously the party has, winding down, ending, cleaning up kind of thing. Sylvia's thinking, Fran, it was the best party ever. Fran mentions maybe next year they want to invest in a new 50th birthday banner because there's something else written on the back.
Did you catch what it was? Or are you saving it?
I did not catch what it was.
Vote for Dukakis.
Correct.
Okay.
Vote Dukakis.
Okay. And so then, Fran kind of catches up with Niles, like, oh, Niles, did you let it out? Where were you for like the last hour? And Niles does that complicated, like kind of baseball signal with ending in the curvy, hands. And oh, did you enjoy your time with cousin? What was the name?
Sophie.
Yowza. So then Yetta is leaving as well, and you notice she has a bunch of money in her hands as she's leaving, and she says to them, oh, if you find a nice diamond cocktail ring, send it to the home. And Fran's like, Grandma, you don't own a diamond cocktail ring. That's why I said if you find one.
Right. I'm just saying if you find one.
Yeah. But then it's finally just like Fran and Maxwell in the living room. And, Maxwell's wondering what they talked about all that time. Oh, this and that. And then she mentions like, oh yeah, and your hair did come up. She doesn't like it. She says it looks like Pepe Le Pew, which was Fran's comment, but now she's attributing it to Cece. And then like Maxwell is like, oh, he kind of, I don't know how to, he's like acting as if this is such a secret. He's like, I rather think she has a thing for me. No.
Get
Like,
out of town.
yeah, like, duh. This is, we've all seen it since the very first episode. And
Mhm.
and then Fran mentions like, oh yeah, she was talking about that time in Fiji.
The close
You know,
encounter.
yes, at the bar. What? They were actually, it turns out, taking quinine at the British consulate, and so we're out of it. He says he was delirious, and so Fran's like, she must have been delirious as well. Um, but yeah, so Fran asks him, well, are you sad you weren't able to go, to your weekend? Oh no, it feels like I was rather there. Ida bears a resemblance. And Fran's like, well, I told her if she's gonna dye her hair, do the mustache too. And she
Right.
like emphasizes it. And it kind of like ends on a freeze frame of like a very exaggerated face on Fran. But yeah, so do you guys have anything to add to that scene?
I don't think so. Do you,
Nope.
Miranda?
Nope.
Okay. Did you catch the end credits scene?
I did.
Debbie? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's sort of like a flashback to a conversation between Brighton and Yetta before Yetta left. And she's counting the money that they swindled out of Fran's relatives. That's 75 for you and 185 for me. Hey, you said 50-50. That's not fair. And Yetta says, let's talk fair. You live in a mansion. I live in a home. You have your whole life ahead of you. I got 1 to 2 weeks tops. You can eat corn. Here, let me show you something. She starts like lowering her pants. And he said, fine, take it all.
Take it all.
Yeah, she won.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I guess that's the episode.
Mhm.
Are there any overarching points we want to talk about before we get into our shticks?
The only thing I was kind of gonna bring up was, I think Miranda, you kind of pointed this out as well. Like, they have a lot of stuff, like a full thing of makeup,
Yeah.
all these different things. So, are we assuming then that was all in Cece's bag?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so did you notice that when Cece goes down into the wine cellar initially, she has a big overnight bag?
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I thought it looked a little dated, it just didn't look like her. It had this like floral pattern. But to me, it was sort of odd for her. Like, that's her overnight bag that she brought it down into the wine cellar. But of course, the reason she did is so she has all of those accessories available to her for the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, because I would have like left it upstairs.
exactly.
Running down to the wine cellar.
But then what's sort of weird is, when Fran says to her after Maxwell has rescued them, she says, oh, Miss Babcock, you forgot your purse. That's then not the bag Cece's picking up.
Mm.
So that was just interesting to me.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Should we jump into favorite fashion then?
Yeah.
Sure.
Miranda, as our guest, would you like to identify the first outfit worth discussing?
So even though Fran's cocktail dress was amazing, I was kind of actually digging like Cece's kind of Renaissance, like golden blouse sleeve with the like velvet vest. I was like, this is peak 90s. Like this is
Let me ask you, do you think that's something that the outfit is Cece, or more of kind of like something Fran would wear?
I would say I think it is a little more bold, I think, than we've seen other things Cece wearing.
Mhm.
But I will defer to you guys because I haven't watched the previous episodes in probably 15 or 20 years. So I don't really remember.
I guess to me, like, just because of, the sleeve plus the vest combination, that's something that we've seen Fran wear a number of times already, where she's wearing like a black vest with a colored shirt, and then other times with or without funky sleeves. I will note that in this episode, the only color Cece wears is gold. Everything else is either black or white.
Hmm.
So, Bernadette, what do you think?
About Cece or in general?
Take your pick.
Okay. Well, so this may be a bit surprising. I kind of liked Maggie's outfit for the party. It looks very old-fashioned. Because it has like lace long sleeves and it's like a pale green like dress.
Mm-hmm.
So I could not pull it off. But I kind of liked it. But again, it
Oh,
looked dated.
it was
Very
also age appropriate too.
yeah. Yeah. So
Um, for her,
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. But also Sylvia looked great in her in her red dress.
She did.
Yeah, that was a good one.
I mean, always, make an appearance in a red dress from the Fine family, right?
I will comment on Fran's cocktail dress. That was my favorite outfit in this episode. It's a black dress, it's sequin, and it has like pink and blue and I think a little bit of gold. It's just multicolored. It's comes down, it doesn't come down all the way to her knee. It has tank top, tank sleeves, like scoop neck. I thought she looked fantastic. So it was a shame she missed the party.
hmm Yeah. Although, like, yeah, I'm kind of curious now that you mentioned that, like timeline wise, if she got like any time because um she asked Niles about the last hour. Like, do you think she got to enjoy any of the party? Or is it just where we see them like packing up at the end?
She probably got to see a little bit of the party, like the absolute tail end, like because Cece was locked in the the wine cellar for a bit,
Mhm.
before Niles let her out. And
Yeah.
Niles was gone for an hour, so we know that Cece was at least so. But like she missed the bulk of the party, I think.
I,
Mhm.
I also this is kind of just a timeline question, but like at what point did Mr. Sheffield like come back? Like did he get all the way to because he would have had to have been gone for hours, right? So if he goes, did he get on the train and like take the train to where they were going and then find out CT wasn't there and then came back? Like, or did he just wait in the train station for 3
I
hours?
assumed, yeah, I assumed he was waiting at the train station, but I
That
don't
was my
know.
assumption as well, that he was at the train station and Cece didn't show up. But also query if Cece, so the original plan was they were going to meet at the train station, right? And then Cece wanted to change the plan and pick Maxwell up. Why would Maxwell have left the house before Cece got there to pick him up? Like, I can't imagine Maxwell is that much more of a nervous traveler or that much more of like someone who feels like he needs to get there with more time. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, I
Plot
also
device.
like, I
Yeah.
also imagine they're leaving from like Penn Station. So like,
Probably, yeah.
or I mean, it's either Penn or Grand Central. Either way, like it just it's not like when you go and fly and have to go through the TSA. It's just get on the
Mhm.
train.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Cece also didn't in the beginning at least, it didn't seem like she was like rushing per se. Like she was like, oh, like I have time to go down and like get a bottle of wine and like so
Mhm.
it still must have been
Early enough.
early enough. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe we don't know, but maybe Niles relayed the wrong time too. Who knows? To avoid make sure that Maxwell
Oh
would
yeah, like
miss
we're gonna meet
Cece.
early. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past him.
Oh no, definitely not.
We'll see more trickery from Niles as we continue our trek through the nanny. Um, I will mention one other outfit, and it's the outfit that Cece was wearing in the first scene. That she's wearing a long black skirt with a gold chain belt, and then a white button-down blouse with a big upright collar. She's also wearing, I think, a gold necklace. So she's wearing very classic colors there. I sort of liked it, and I would have liked it much better had she plopped the collar down instead of having it propped up. But
Yeah.
that's just me.
Well, that wouldn't have been the 90s.
I suppose. Is there any other fashion you guys want to talk about? Or do we want to jump into our notable New Yorkers?
I'm ready for notable New Yorkers.
All right, take us away.
Well, we already discussed Clinton, so referenced, we're assuming, to Bill Clinton, the former president.
Who was president at the time.
Yes. And then, okay, because I kept, like, not quite getting, like, I don't know how to spell his name, but Gene
Shalit,
like, real person, I'm
yes,
assuming?
retired American author, journalist, film and book critic. He was also a television personality. He is known for his oversized handlebar mustache, frequent use of puns, and fuzzy hair. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay.
Yeah,
mustache.
I looked at the picture, and I'm going to agree with Fran when she was like, Sylvia, you need to stop huffing the hairspray. I'm gonna call him unique looking.
Distinctive, I think, is the word you're looking for.
Yeah. There's also reference to the Bay of Pigs.
Yes, that was the 1961 failed invasion of Cuba by Cuban exiles who were opposed to Fidel Castro's Cuban Revolution. The failed invasion was financed and directed by the United States.
Miranda, if you want to hop into, I don't want to monopolize this section.
Oh no, yeah. I don't actually remember, besides like the main Gene Shalit part. I don't remember anybody else.
Yeah. So, like, there was that Fran made that reference to Diane Fosse.
Yep. Diane Fosse was an American primatologist and conservationist who studied gorillas before her murder in 1985. Also, according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay. Now, again, another name I couldn't quite catch correctly. Pavarotti?
Pavarotti.
Oh, Pavarotti.
Okay.
Pavarotti was an Italian opera singer. He crossed into mainstream music as well. That's also according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay. Now, she, who is it? Was it Fran or Niles made reference to Captain and to Neil?
I believe it was Fran.
Yes.
Do you know who they are?
Yes, they're singers from like the 70s, I feel like, right?
Yeah, they're a husband and wife team who have 5 certified gold or platinum albums and a number of popular singles, including Love Will Keep Us Together, Do That to Me One More Time, and most importantly for this episode, Muskrat Love.
Gotcha. Yeah,
which is
that was what Niles was comparing it to, having Pavarotti singing Muskrat Love.
Yes, I listened to it. It was an experience. Anyway,
I mean, go ahead if you want.
In that same scene, there's a reference to Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, which I feel like there's more of a story here than I could figure out in my quick internet research, but that was a band formed after the Whipped Cream and Other Delights album was released. It disbanded in 1969. That's according to discogs.com. I feel like there was more to the story, but everything I kept seeing was like trying to sell me the album, and I was like, this was not what I was looking for, but thanks. I will mention, we've already mentioned Notre Dame. That's a reference to a romantic or gothic novel titled The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which has apparently been, as of current time, been adapted into film over a dozen times. There are references to the Tony Awards, which are the awards given to Broadway. Broadway performances. They have been since 1947. Let's see. In the scene where Cece initially goes down into the wine cellar, she is singing the song "Luck Be a Lady," which is from Guys and Dolls.
Okay.
Luck was not a lady for her.
Nope.
Nope.
Shall I continue, or would you like to pick up?
Yeah. Well, okay. My question to you is the scene where he says, Uncle Stan's like, I have one word for you, styrofoam. Is that a reference to, I believe it's from The Graduate, where they're like one word, plastics.
I have no idea, but
Oh, yeah, you
sounds
might be
believable.
more of a film buff.
Well, I
Then-
watched The Graduate like years ago, but the one word plastics. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yep, I just Googled. There's like a scene from The Graduate where this guy like pulls aside Dustin Hoffman as like, I have one word, plastics. So I'm gonna take that as a reference and just substituting plastics with styrofoam. To which, Brian's like, that's not biodegradable.
Right. But Stanley wasn't asking him to eat it. So
Nope. Yeah. But there's a couple of references we've already kind of mentioned in passing, like Shawshank Redemption, movie from the early 90s.
from 1994. So they timed it perfectly.
Yep. And
that
we
reminds
also
me,
talked
when
about-
did Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame? I think that was after that.
It was after that. It was 1996. Thank you. I actually did make a note that the Disney version came out in 1996. So after this episode originally aired.
We also, I mentioned Facts of Life, which was a show, I think from like the 80s. Right?
I noted that it was a spinoff from Different Strokes. So I didn't jot down the time period. Sorry.
Yeah. And I'm assuming whenever she's like nobody with the last name Cassidy, I'm assuming the Cassidy brothers.
That makes sense.
Cassidy's.
And
like
the Facts of
Cassidy
Life.
And
sorry.
Go ahead.
Facts of Life, according to IMDb, was on from 1979 to 1988.
Okay. Yeah. So like Sean, David, Cassidy, I'm assuming. But yeah. I'll let you get some into, Debbie.
So Pepe Le Pew, I believe we've talked about him before, but he's the French striped skunk in Warner Brothers Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies cartoons. He is constantly looking for love, but because of his odor and aggressive romantic maneuvers, other characters tend to run away from him. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. We've mentioned Dukakis. Michael Dukakis ran for president in 1988. He was a Democratic candidate. And I think that's all I have.
Okay. I'm just double checking. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it too.
This was an episode full of references. Yeah. So then,
yeah,
go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, was there anything in Yiddish Cup this week?
The only thing was the reference to a bar mitzvah.
Mm-hmm.
With Shmooey was going to be bar mitzvah while Stanley was on his cruise, and Stanley was sorry he was going to miss it. Here, this is for me and your Aunt Cookie. Like, often, I mean, we've talked about B'nai Mitzvot before. It marks a child's transition into adulthood where they're, responsible for their own actions, and oftentimes gifts of money were customary. I mean, I got a lot of checks, or I think I got a number of bonds, I think. Mostly checks, some cash. But yeah, so anyway, he and Yetta sounds like they made out quite well for him not being Shmooey, not being bar mitzvahed, and the family not knowing those things. Yeah, I think that was the only thing.
Okay. So 90s nostalgia.
This
entire plot would not work today.
I don't think the like being trapped in a wine cellar thing would totally work. but I feel like the whole focus on like Cece basically having no personality outside of her obsession with Maxwell would definitely not work.
I was thinking from like a practical standpoint. So the reason Cece goes down to the wine cellar in the first place is because, well, first of all, Maxwell's not there because Cece called the house, told Niles to tell Maxwell. And
Mm,
like, whereas today she would just directly text Maxwell, right?
yep. Yep.
And so, like, that whole piece of it hinges on that communication breaking down. Now, I could totally see where you would have a situation where, like, you get trapped down somewhere and, like, your cell phone, like, the battery dies or something, which is why you can't use it.
Or it's a bomb
Yeah. Or
cellar.
you're
You have
you're a
no
bomb shelter. Yeah. And so you can't get cell reception.
Signal or
Yeah.
yeah. But like leading up to why she went down there in the first place, like she would have had direct communication with Maxwell, I would think, with via text.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So Niles could not have like messed with them.
Fair.
Yeah. Unless it's like like Maxwell left his phone on the counter and CC texted and Niles decided to delete it or something, you know, like
Yeah. Or like
check it so that
maybe
Maxwell didn't check the message. I don't know.
maybe Maxwell was there waiting for Cece because he did actually get the text. Cece gets trapped. And then Niles is like, oh, Cece left to go to the train station. You should go.
Yeah.
Like you're right. Like the initial like setup would need to be different.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point.
And then also, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say too with cousin Irving, whatever.
Irby, yeah.
I would imagine that Maggie would have like checked online to see if he had any social media accounts. Like,
Yeah. I also
go
think
with
that,
that.
you know, if Sylvia was really trying to like push a match, she'd have a picture of him on her phone, be like, look at my little nephew. Isn't he cute? Let's set you up. Yeah, no, that's fair. I thought the party attire, everyone's party attire looked to me very dated. Maybe it's just that I haven't gone to a lot of parties since the 90s, but all the sequins and it looked very dated to me.
Yeah. Well, the 90s are coming back, so
Cool.
who knows?
I can go dig out all of my sequins from the 90s and see what still fits. Also something that looked a little, maybe this is just my perception, but it also seems sort of dated to me that they had purchased a helium canister. I don't know if that's something what people can still purchase. I just remember a few years ago there were some articles about how we were like running out of helium.
Oh.
Like that there was a helium crisis or something.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah. Although I think I have seen some people buy helium like canisters for home.
Oh.
Yeah. I do think though you'd be much more likely to get all your balloons like because they'll fill them for you at Party City or like a party store.
Yeah.
So I do think it would be much more likely that you get them all filled and bring them home like already ballooned. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think we saw old cars in this episode. So
I don't think there was really an exterior.
Exactly.
Not with the old cars. Well, because from our perspective, everything took place in the house.
Yep.
Right.
But yeah, but like the wine cellar, like you were saying, it was a pretty good size. Like,
yeah.
it was a tiny room.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting that she even brought up well, I guess Fran had started saying, oh, this is a pretty small room. Oh, what are you, claustrophobic?
Right.
But yeah.
I mean, and then Fran, of course, had tried to use her adenoids, which don't underestimate the power of them. She had next door neighbors that moved closer to the airport. But yet the fact that it was a bomb shelter didn't help. The last 90s nostalgia thing I have is the vote Dukakis reference.
Mm.
Again, he ran for president in 1988, so that seems sort of dated.
So that's interesting then. So then we assume that's the first time or one of the first times Sylvia turned 50. It's an 88.
Well,
60th
Fran
time, or
is supposed to be in her early 30s, right?
She's 29.
Yes,
well,
but
yeah, like turning 30 or something, but at one point turning 25. We assume 30s. Yes.
I mean, she's forever 29. That's
Correct.
But yeah, so it probably Sylvia's at least in her probably her 60s, like early 60s.
See, that's what I thought based on Yetta's comment that she is Brazier's older than 50.
Yeah.
So I took it like Sylvia's probably like 62-ish.
Yeah. So that would mean this is maybe her third time turning 50.
You know, it's nice when you get to control your age like that.
Yeah.
Did you have anything, Miranda, that kind of struck you as 90s?
Well, I think some of like the party foods, because where there was like cocktail wieners, and I think they had like meatballs. Like it was very. I think of that as kind of like 90s, like early thousands party food too. Not that you don't see those things now, but I feel like that was like
More
very,
so.
yeah, ubiquitous at that time.
Nice use of the word ubiquitous.
We're educated.
I read a lot, okay?
No, I wasn't teasing.
No, we're teasing you. But.
Oh, okay, cool. Cool. I'm like Cece. I'm totally oblivious to apparently social signals.
Yeah. So, yeah, I would. Yeah, I think some, like I was saying, just some of the plot points hinges on it being in the 90s to some extent. Or like we said, you'd have to kind of redo different scenes to make it work today.
Also, to your point about like cell phones, I think people would have noticed Fran and Cece missing a lot sooner, probably because people would have been texting them. And if
they're not responding.
Yeah, so and if their phones didn't work, then it'd be like, oh, it's weird, like Fran hasn't texted me back in 2 hours or something.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's pretty much all I had for 90s nostalgia.
So I guess it's time for future fun.
Yeah, unless anybody had anything else, future fun.
Okay. So I only have a handful for you tonight. First, I'm gonna circle back on the Aunt Frida point. Aunt Frida is later played by a different actress, and actually we see her in I think 4 different episodes. We see her in the episode A Fine Family Feud, where we learn that she and Sylvia haven't spoken in a really long time because they're feuding. There's a reason that'll be important, which we'll talk about then. We also see her in the episode Frida Need a Man, where we find out that she's been widowed so many times but now she's broke. So they're trying to get her millionaire boyfriend to propose to her. We see her in the X Niles, which is the episode where Niles quits his job working for the Sheffield family and he goes and works for Frida as a houseboy. And finally, we see she's in the episode The In-Laws Who Came Forever, where she's very upset about not getting invited to a family function, which will remain nameless, and ends up buying Sylvia and Morty's apartment building and kicking them out.
Ooh.
So Aunt Frida, we will see, is more of a force to be reckoned with than a heavily made up praying mantis. So I just need to point that out. So that's point 1. Point 2, we've kind of highlighted the fact that Fran says to her mother, "Ma, I hope you fake it better with Daddy." And Sylvia says, "I was his first. What does he know?" Which just kind of strikes me as amusing because in an episode in season 3, Fran explains to in the episode Having His Baby, Fran explains to Val that she knows she was conceived through artificial insemination because she knows her parents have never like so it's just amusing the about face on that. In fairness, Fran does at one point walk in on her parents in their bedroom, and Fran is embarrassed. She's yelled at for going into their bedroom without knocking, which, to be fair, not a good idea. Don't walk into people's bedrooms without knocking, especially if you hear them making sounds of ecstasy, which is Fran's phrasing. And Fran said, I heard sounds of ecstasy coming from your bedroom. I thought you were eating a cheesecake. That was not what they were doing. So yeah, there's that. And then the final thing I'll point out is, there's a lot of discussion about Maxwell's gray streak. I believe it's in the episode That's Midlife that Maxwell goes and dyes his hair and gets rid of it. And Fran yells at him something along the lines of, "That was my streak, my gray streak. I caused it and it was mine to remove." Yeah. So
no more Pepe Le Pew.
But I think it actually comes back after that. It's just gone for a little bit, but it was a point that he was sort of having this midlife crisis. So he dyes his hair to look younger. It took 10 years off, as he says. And then he walks out of the room saying, "Catch you later, babe." Anyway, so yeah, that is the future fun that we have to look forward to. So I think it's time for us to rate the episode. As our frequent listeners know, we like to rate each episode from 1 to 5 lipsticks. Is it my turn or your turn?
It's my turn.
Excellent. I love it when it's your turn.
But Miranda, you also get to join in this fun.
You do, yes.
All right.
So I enjoyed the episode. I'm trying to compare to some of the other episodes from the season, because for the most part, I feel like this season has been relatively strong. Obviously, there are a couple of episodes that you and I have both said were not as great, but I'll just go ahead and give it a 5 because there's nothing really against it. If that makes any sense.
Okay. No, that's fair.
I mean,
you can always adjust if you need to.
Yeah. Well, just because we actually get acknowledgement from Maxwell that Cece has a thing for him. That's growth, I guess, or some awareness. I'm curious what you give it.
I was going to give it a 4 before you gave it a 5, because the way I'm torn between a 4 and a 4.5 because it is a good episode. There's
what? I'll give it a 4.5. How about that?
Are we allowed to do half measures? I'm just curious here.
We've also done
quarters.
0.75. So we make the rules.
We make the rules. We also can adjust. We also can adjust at the end of the season, which we've done. We did last season. So
I'll give it 4.5.
I'm going to give it a 4.5. You've convinced me.
Okay.
I mean, look, as you put it, there's nothing wrong with the episode. I enjoy it. It's one that I have watched with multiple times. I guess I'm thinking about the other episodes that we've seen this season that we've already given 5s to. I'm thinking about some episodes that we have coming forward that I like just way better. So yeah, I'm going to give it I'll meet you in the middle and give it a 4.5. Okay. Miranda, how would you rate the episode?
Well, I'm going to give it a 4. Because I think that it's really funny. But I actually really enjoyed the kind of bonding that you got between Fran and Cece, where they kind of realize they're in kind of the same position.
Mhm.
Um, and which I think they probably already know to some degree at this point. But um, I think also, if I remember correctly, this early on, I don't think they're really pushing Fran and Maxwell as much together. So maybe not quite. But anyway, so I enjoyed that bonding a lot. But I and I understand why they did this for plot reasons, but I didn't quite like the complete about face where you have Cece kind of like seems like she's finally like getting a clue and like realizing this is not going to go anywhere, and then just turns on a dime the minute
Mhm.
that Mr.
Maxwell
Sheffield
shows up.
shows up
Yeah.
again. So I'm gonna that's where I'm subtracting the one lipstick for that. Um, but yeah, no, otherwise I thought it was a pretty. Oh, and the other thing I'm gonna say is, and I'm sure this had to do with like budget and timing constraints, but we never get to see cousin Sophie
Mm.
that Niles supposedly, spent an
Took
hour
out.
with.
Yeah.
So I was left hanging. I was like, what does cousin Sophie look like? Um, so anyway, those are my only detractors.
Yeah.
But otherwise,
Well,
yeah, a really fun episode.
yeah. Well, I just again, every time I hear Shmooey, I just laugh. So I really appreciated that aspect of the episode.
Yeah.
I'll just also throw out that I like it when Fran Drescher's parents are on the show because I just find it amusing. But it does bother me that Frida changes. I can't imagine that Fran has two Aunt Fridas. So anyway,
Maybe she does. Maybe that's part of the gag.
Yeah.
I don't think so. We also never meet Morty's brothers, unless Stanley could be one of his brothers, but query we don't know that. We do know Uncle Jack is Sylvia's brother. But
yeah, I also think it's very cute, and I think you see this throughout the show, but the way that like Fran's family basically adopts the Sheffield kids.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Shmooey.
yeah, I just think that's very sweet, right? Like they're just kind of like, oh, like these kids don't have like they're gonna just be part of our family now, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and then of course, like harkening back, like to an earlier episode, when Yetta stays with the Sheffields and she's worried about Cece being all around, like around so much because the friend, didn't you notice the kid's hair's blonde?
Right.
And friend's like, those aren't my kids.
They're not my kids. He's not my husband. Geez, she couldn't have spaced out like this with Mr. Sheffield. No, with him, she could remember things from the womb.
Yeah.
No, I mean the episode you're referring to also has the very loud shouting by Sylvia that these are not Fran's children. Fran doesn't have any children. She's not married. She's all alone. Poor Fran.
Yeah.
Well, do either of you have anything else you want to add?
I would just say, really happy Miranda could join us for today's episode. Miranda, anything you want to say, or how was your experience on our show?
Oh no, it's a lot of fun, and it was not that I need an excuse to watch The Nanny, but it got me to watch The Nanny again, and that was great. So I enjoyed that, and at some point, I will have wine bad enough that I'm willing to try the Nanny sangria recipe with, and we'll see how it goes.
Yes, and you'll need to let us know, and maybe we can do an update for our
Right.
listeners.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 33, When You Pish Upon a Star.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.